it's already time for another look at the month ahead, because it's already the end of the month. You know, February ends quite fast, and February started a little late for us, so we're ready to talk about March. And what an interesting February it was. When last we spoke, I didn't speak much about political affairs, but my original idea was that Zuma's facing the chop in March, and so a couple of weeks early. I don't think anyone really complains either way, but is because of the thorny issue of birth times that we don't have for pretty much all of our political leaders in this country. And birth times are all important in astrology because they show the actual context of when something happens in our lives. So we need a context for our professional lives, our status in the world, our work, all of those things that affect people in power very strongly. But nevertheless, we're probably not finished with talking about Jacob Zuma in the months or years ahead, because there is more to tell. So before we get into the month of March 2018, I want to talk a little bit about what we can expect on the political scene as a result of some of the changes that we've seen. Well, firstly then, to talk about President Ramaphosa. And the important thing, of course, again, we don't have a birth time. Although interestingly, the election, his inauguration, actually provided an opportunity for astrologers to see a possible time of day that he was born. And so, nevertheless, we work without any accurate time for him. So what we can see is that the conditions under which Cyril Ramaphosa was elected was when the planets Jupiter and the Moon got together. In Ramaphosa's own chart, of course, that is, which in astrology is considered a very great significance. The Indians call it the coming together of the elephant and the lion. And it's certainly true that in an African context, that kind of metaphor has a lot of resonance. And perhaps in the kind of authentic African and traditional leadership fashion, with those powerful traditional African animals, we had a strong sense of, again, ourselves and some of that hope that we felt as South Africans probably 20 years ago or more. So there certainly was a recognition of Ramaphosa as the elephant and the lion coming together, the African leader. So all of that does bode well with respect to what was happening in his chart, and that continues on and off for much of this year. However, we know that there are big challenges to face, and certainly his chart looks like there are still some challenges to face. Over the course of the last year, he's had a lot of enemies working against him, and that phase in his chart is not actually quite over and continues as far as April of this year. And indeed, with President Ramaphosa's chart, April does look still like quite a challenging month for him. That does lead him to an opportunity for a fresh victory. So we saw a process leading up to his election as president, and actually what we need to realize is that there's still an ongoing process with regards to the cabinet reshuffles, with regards to all the different steps that need to happen. He is following a strategy appropriate to himself. He is a Scorpio, and that means he's going to play his cards close to his chest. He's in fact what we call a double Scorpio. So there's plenty of he's going to play his cards close to his chest. And he's also got very natural and strong leadership qualities in his chart, which of course is not surprising at all. And all of those are going to enable him to carefully steer this strategy of his until he has dealt with all of his opposition. And that's what we might need to realize, is that there's a lot more that he needs to deal with than meets the eye, and that is obvious to us about Gupta leaks and Zuma and all of those kind of things as well. So let's be patient and see, because it's going to take as far as April for us all to understand what is the initial shape of the Ramaphosa presidency. As regards to Jacob Zuma, the question is, of course, whether he will face the music for the 783 charges against him and other possible charges or issues, or whatever the case may be. So we've seen over the last year or so as well that Zuma still had some capacity to survive. It was clear last year that he was never going to leave, astrologically, during last year. And this year, I only thought it started becoming possible from about March. But there was always still that possibility, because the final crunch in his chart shows more likely as 2019. Well, now we know that the 2019 crunch, it's still there and he's not the president. And that probably means that facing the music, facing the courts, facing the charges, and the process of that begins in 2019. It's possible around February 2019. Some of that will also depend on when things like the elections are and so on, because we know there'll be a certain amount of control over those things. So there's a window period astrologically in which things operate that starts from February 2019, makes it most likely then, but persists for the full year and longer, 2019, 20, perhaps longer, we're going to see to do with all of that. So that does then beg the question, is there still a possibility, a likelihood, a danger of the ANC actually splitting? Well, ANC, although it has passed the very obvious ways that that shows in astrology, is still looking very shaky, and there is still a lot of damage that for a while we haven't seen because we've been looking the other way, that needs to be dealt with. So April itself, after in the later part of April, after Ramaphosa's early issues in April and early victory, there are some possible shakes in the ANC, and again more clearly December and January 2018-19, looking quite shaky. So there is still a lot of challenge going on to the organization itself that goes probably well up to the elections of 2019, which we shall discuss at the beginning of 2019, but are looking better for the ANC because I looked also at Malema and I looked at Maimane. And Malema is at probable around the time of the elections, is not looking like he's making a lot of progress, probably staying the same. Worst case scenario is it's actually pushing against him, but it looks more like he's probably staying the same. Nevertheless, probably consolidating at the same time. So even if there seems to be a pause in the EFF's growth in 2019, that could well just be some consolidating, and perhaps even some consolidating in clearing up some of the membership. Who knows? We'll see closer to the time as well. And for Maimane, this is a very big year, because this is a year where he's got to do a lot of coming down to earth and having bubbles popped. There are a couple of challenges exactly of that nature in 2018 and 2019 in Maimane's chart, and that will require a big adjustment for him and his party, and a difficult adjustment for him at the very least. So big challenges over this year for him, and will he be able to adjust to the changed flow in South African politics is a big question as far as I'm concerned, because I don't think it's looking good for him, and I think it gets worse and worse over the next 2 years. Again, we will see more of that as we look closer as the months go by, but at this exact stage it looks like despite everything he's not quite facing reality the right way, or is on a particular idea and not really seeing the real, and will have to come down to earth in a big way over the course of the year. So let's see what happens. Exciting times remain, and we'll have a closer look as the year unfolds each month what's going on in the political scene. But for now, let's have a look at what's going on for you in March. Aries, you will be full of enthusiasm as usual, but you need to be open-armed and open-minded as well. There are changes, different kinds of things going on for you over the course of this month, and you need to be ready to deal with anything. The problem is there's also a lot of family duties and responsibilities and that kind of thing going down as well. So also important that you find a balance. The end result, that really means learning to say no. You're going to have to say no to some things that don't have anything to do with your responsibilities, and you're going to have to make sure that your own personal goals are being followed while you're adjusting to some of the unexpected changes. But unexpected changes can be fun. It's also an opportunity to kind of clean up in your relationship life, really make that work a little bit better for you and get some space back, and for some areas also to start new relationships. But again, that open-hearted, open-minded approach is necessary for everything to work this month. Like that, you'll get the best of both worlds: your own goals and those responsibilities that have got to be done. But some of those responsibilities could also be wrapped up around now. Kind of just saying. So the thing is, Taurus, you need a lot of security in your life, and actually this month you should actually have that security in your life. Money is probably coming in, even though it might not look like it. You're not feeling rich or looking rich or any of those kind of things. The fact is it is. And if you just tread water, it's going to fritter away. So this is a better time to concentrate on some important goals. Not yet to see big results in them, but kind of make sure that your efforts and your resources are put back into what you're doing. Over the longer term, it's going to be better for you. It's easier said than done because there seems to be quite a lot on your plate. And so all those duties, responsibilities, existing work, all of that stuff is actually going to come first. So in between the cracks, you've just got to make sure that you're reinvesting in yourself this month and the things that are important to you. Luckily, with relationships, there's a great opportunity to do that. Existing relationships are really going well and respond well to doing stuff together and date nights and reinvesting in yourselves, and new relationships and trying to get them a little bit of sprucing up the beautiful Taurian way is a great way to go back out there into the world and grab what you want. So Gemini, on the subject of treading water, it looks like as ever there's a lot on your go this month, but you're probably beginning to get the sense that there isn't much in it for you. You might feel okay in the usual, Gemini way of keeping all the people happy all the time, but this is the time to notice that you could be suffering because you're not gaining and you're expending a lot of energy in everything that's going on around you. So time to pull that in a little bit and look at your need to please, whether it's on the social level or on the personal level or whatever the case may be. That's one thing to look at, even if that doesn't work for you, because for some people that's cool. You're not going to have that side of it to look at. For all Geminis, what you are going to be able to do is turn it around. This is a month to get help from other people, and that's a great way to ensure that you're not doing everything for anyone. Let them do something for you. Easier said than done, because it means asking for help. You might not be that willing to do that, but that's what your homework for March 2018 is all about. Ask for some help. In your personal relationships, you need to negotiate and separate some things that have become all tangled up in each other. Much easier to keep focused on who's who and what's what after you do that. Cancer, there's a lot going on in your life, and it actually is too much. This is not about you running around having to help anyone. This is about you actually needing to withdraw a little bit and regather your own forces in some way. Not that you're the rushing type, but it looks like you've been rushing into things, or you want to rush into things. Either way, this is not the time for rushing into anything, and this is really all about, as I said, taking stock and rebuilding your resources. All kinds of relationships are very important to you, Cancer, and this is the time when your existing relationships are what it's all about. You actually need to draw on others for a change, not always be the provider. This is a bit of an opportunity to be the receiver, to be willing to actually receive, and to take the opportunity of getting that and balancing that with your need to actually take charge of the situation or provide for others. You're still going to have to get on with your stuff, and that also means that, like most people this month, it's about prioritizing what's for you and what's for other people, and how do we need to sort those things out. But this time it really is for you, so make sure both you and other people are thinking that way. Okay, Leo, something that you're not at all averse to, and that is taking charge. This is a leadership month for you. It's about leading yourself, and it's about leading others, but it's all about just taking charge and getting those that show on the road, making the goals come to some kind of conclusion. If it's actually, whether you're self-employed or whether it's just important that you've now got to get some of your own goals done, it applies equally to that, if not more than that, that you can just pull all your forces together and just go, and it's going to get done. That's going to make your professional life work very successfully. And then if you are in any kind of leadership situation in any aspect of your life, this is the time to draw a line between taking responsibility for those you lead and leading them. So obviously this is about leading them, and so not taking on responsibility, making sure that you're doing your thing and your thing is going ahead, and that those in any team or around your situation are supportive of that and on their own mission. In your personal life, you don't want to control your partner or run their show. So there you've got to learn a bit of cooperation and making sure you're focused on mutual needs and your partner's needs. So for Virgos, Virgos are the sign of service, and Virgos like to be helpful and generous and all of those kinds of things. And you find yourself in situations where you're feeling resentful about something that didn't come back to you, and probably even guilty about feeling resentful, because that's actually the last thing you want to feel. And Virgos can tie themselves into anxious knots about those kind of feelings. You've got to remember that as an earth sign, earth is a tangible, practical, physical resource. So as an earth sign, if you give of your resources, you must make sure that you replace them. And that means that other people need to give something in return. You're not there to be a servant or to be a slave, or to give of yourself without anything in return. Don't be shy to ask for that in your professional life, and to make sure that wherever you're doing things for others, there is some clear sense of what should come back to you and that it does. Don't be silent. In your personal life, this is your month to be much more playful. Let go of all that other stuff. It'll balance out the anxiety and worry you could be making for yourself, and just have fun. Who thinks of Libra as a leadership sign? But sometimes you are Librans, and this is one of those times where instead of just being about balance, you can be about negotiation. You can get yourself in a situation this month where you actually occupy some influence and the ability to persuade. So negotiation and those kind of things will take you far at this time. And it relates to the fact that Libra is actually one of the signs of initiative and leadership this month. So in terms of your own work, and perhaps in other areas of your life as well, this month you've got to think strategically. You're going to have to take the initiative and act with a certain amount of courage in your working environment. If the negotiations related to that, it may also relate to having to be courageous to negotiate. But either way, it's going to work. So this is the time to make that strategy and put it into action as well during the month of March. Your personal life will shine because of this more assertive you. The assertive and courageous you is more attractive. It's also something that's natural to Librans, and you'll find that during the month, a lot of what you want to happen and what you want to choose happens in your personal life. Good thing. Scorpios, like some others this month, have ended up with too much on your plate. And that means you've actually got to concentrate on your strengths and focus on how those benefit you following the goals that you have to do. There's a lot of stuff that you've got to deal with, and the last thing you need is anything else. Other people might be pushing you for things to go faster, but this is one of the times where it is kind of good to dig in and make sure things happen your own way. You might also find that you have stretched yourself a little bit thin, whether that's financially or with promises to others or something like that. So you need to draw some lines, and unfortunately might have to behave in a way that looks selfish to others. But regrouping and concentrating on your strengths means you're going to have to prioritize some stuff. And that means that people are going to have to abide by your slowness. Sounds familiar. And in your personal life, that is going to give you the opportunity to really concentrate on what's great about your relationships, or about that aspect of your life, your romantic nature, your ability to connect with people, and an opportunity to really develop your personal relationships much further. Sagittarius, it's one of those months where you feel like doing everything except what you actually have to do. But as you know about those kind of times, you got to do what you got to do. The have to do stuff is usually something that's getting rid of or dealing with some responsibilities this month, or some commitments you've gotten yourself into. Those ones are going to have to be dealt with. But where you do need to monitor things and perhaps draw a few lines is where someone else acts with authority over you. Hopefully, you won't engage in any kind of response and retort to that. This is not the time to get distracted by conflict and argument over nothing, especially since you're quite good at moving on, but other people are not that good at moving on, so it could get a little bit unnecessarily complicated. You need to take a more kind of strategic approach, keep quiet, and even be strategic in the sense that many of the people around you right now are going to be helpful and beneficial and great support over the next couple of months. Not for any special reason other than your relationships are also quite important to you. So this is one of those times to be just a little strategic and not cause an unnecessary stir that's so easy for you to move on from, but not always for someone else. Capricorns, you too, like Sagittarians, have got a little bit too much of what is not yours that you have to do rather than all the stuff that you want to do. Unlike Sagittarians, you've probably got a greater sense of commitment and responsibility to actually doing it. And so that stuff has got to be checked off of the checklist all during the course of this month. It doesn't mean that you don't get to have fun or do the things you love. Quite to the contrary. A lot of how you can balance out the chores of March are with fun things that you like to do yourself or on your own, like having a holiday in the house. Those kind of things, that just doing the stuff that you love. In your working environment, you still will have the opportunity to go ahead at something, but really from what we're seeing in all of this, it's probably not the ideal time to do that. Maybe just wait another beat before you fully launch into the next plan, because firstly, you've got enough of your own stuff on your plate right now, and secondly, there's all that commitment and responsibility that actually needs discharging before you can get to any of your own stuff. Even things you have to do for yourself that have just been chores you put aside, now's the time to catch up on all chores. The balance between personal and group needs are often challenging things for Aquarians, because other people often read you wrongly, and they think that you're being distant or remote when actually you aren't, and you're just out there in Aquarius space thinking about what's good for everyone else. And so those miscommunications can lead to bigger consequences. And this is the time when you're going to have to concentrate much more clearly on what you mean to communicate. Because relationships, personal relationships, and people that you're going to have to depend on this month are all crowding for your space and need to be carefully dealt with. Personal relationships are great, but friendship and concentrating on who you love and where love really lies is where the most important step lies for this month for you Aquarians. Those are the relationships to concentrate on. And in the rest of your life, be clear that you give the sense of things work two ways, and I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine, and so people are clear with where they stand and why you're engaging with them. Because often what seems so innocent and clear to you actually just isn't to the other person. So that's the kind of communication you need to do. Just bring it to their level. Pisces, as you know, in the month leading up to your birthday, things can get a little bit shaky. And of course, that's where you have been. So this is the time to kind of pull yourself in and pull that scattered feeling back together, because you probably are feeling a little bit scattered. And that's made worse by you wanting to keep people happy and go with the flow and make everything work well. So this is really the time to, remembering that your birthday is coming up, to concentrate on what are your goals for the year, what do you want to focus on this year. One of the ways you can get a sense of that is to acknowledge how other people are acknowledging you at the moment. You could actually get some kind of acknowledgement or reward during this month. Even if it's not as obvious as that, it's certainly about acknowledging how others acknowledge you. So that also helps you get a sense of what to focus on and what needs to be recognized for you. In terms of your personal life, things are looking a little bit sensitive. In existing relationships, things could be at a sensitive place, and you're going to have to really assert yourself a little bit and make sure that you're clear on where you stand and what you want. Easier said than done. And elsewhere, when you're not in a relationship and in other relationships out there with the world, you've also got to make sure you're making your intentions or your standpoint clearer. Looks like quite an interesting month that everyone's got ahead of them over March. So hang in there and get it done. Remember to check out and like the Facebook page and share it with your friends, and so you can keep track of the show and see what's coming up. We've got some great interviews coming up in the weeks ahead, so be sure to tune in, and I'll be back next Friday at the usual time. See you right here.